Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Licensing Committee on Wednesday, the 19th of October. Could I ask members if they would happy to agree the minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of July 2022 that can be found on pages 3 to 9 of the agenda pack? All in favour? Any abstentions? Thank you. And Julie, I'll sign the minutes. Julie, do we have any apologies?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We have two apologies from Councillor Tristan Ashby and Councillor Vera Dale.
Thank you. And do we have any urgent business? I don't have any. Tina? No. Josie? No. And declarations of interest. Members, do you have any interest to declare? Do we have any non-members wishing to address the meeting? No, we don't. We'll move on to item 6, which is the Breckland Taxi Policy and Procedures, the medical exemption policy. This is on pages 10 to 14, and I will hand over to Josie Hoven.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So the purpose of this part of the policy is to review a new section for the taxi policy following changes to the Equalities Act 2010. On the 28th of June 2022, the Taxi and Private Hire Vehicles Disabled Persons Act came into effect, making changes to the Equality Act 2010. Those changes introduced new and amended existing duties for local authorities and Hackney Carriage private hire drivers and operators alike. The aim of the 22 Act is to ensure that disabled people can use taxi and private hire services with confidence that they will not be discriminated against and assistance will be given where required. The licensing team contacted all licensed drivers and operators to advise of these changes, and the Act allows an exemption to be applied for should a driver be unable to carry out the duties required under the Act on medical grounds. We wish, therefore, to add a section to the Breckland Taxi Policy and Procedures that formally sets out the procedure for applying for an exemption from those duties, the medical exemption policy. The new section advises that an application for exemption can be made using the new application form, which must be completed by a GP. If accepted, the applicant will be given an exemption certificate to display in the vehicle they are driving. This enables anyone approaching the vehicle to see that the driver is exempt from assisting. The exemption certificate can be time limited, i.e. due to injury or if the driver exempted, say for example, 3 months, or a permanent exemption, which would be reviewed at each renewal period of 3 years. A copy of the proposed medical exemption policy is attached as Appendix A. Options available to the committee are that, having regard to the changes made to the Equality Act 2022 and the Breckland Council Taxi Policy and Procedures, the options are to 1, approve the new medical exemption policy and agree adoption into the current Breckland Taxi Policy and Procedures, 2, make amendments to the new medical exemption policy and agree adoption into the same procedures, or do nothing. The reason for recommendation is that Breckland Council adopted its new taxi policy and procedures in January this year. The document outlines the procedures for all matters relating to taxi licensing. It therefore makes sense that this section be included to update the policy with the procedure for medical exemption and will assist with legal compliance with current legislation. To do nothing would not achieve legal compliance and keep abreast of current legislation, nor would it provide the required degree of clarity to customers and enforcement officers. It's expected that the expected benefits, are that Breckland is a mainly rural area and the licensed taxi trade provides a vital public service where many people do not have access to other transport provision. This new section to the policy provides clear guidance on how to apply for a medical exemption and provides clarity on the certificate that must be displayed if an exemption is in place, ensuring compliance by drivers and operators and clarity for customers who will be able to see an exemption certificate displayed in the vehicle. The recommendations to the committee are that the committee review and approve the proposed medical exemption policy so that it can be included in the Breckland Taxi Policy and Procedures with immediate effect. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Josie. Linda.
You know me. There are 3 small amendments I'd like to see made to it. Overall, I think it's fine, but if you look at the appendix on page 13 and go down to just below halfway, where it says, in addition, section 16 and 170 places the following duty on drivers of taxis and private hire vehicles, it says to carry the passenger's dog. I would like to see it say to carry the passenger's guide or assistance dog, just to keep it tight that that is what it's for. And on page 14, if you go to the bottom of the 2nd paragraph, it says, upon receipt of a second doctor's note, the licensing team may either accept the doctor's note or require the driver for referral to a health centre. I think it wants to be say, require the driver to be referred to a health centre, unless anybody can think of a better way of putting it. And at the bottom of the 3rd paragraph, next one down, it says, might result in the suspension of a driver's licence on the basis of being fit and proper. I'd like to see that read on the basis of not being a fit and proper person to hold a licence, so that we've got that tight as well.
Very good, Linda. Very good points. Yes, we'll get those amended. Thank you for those, Linda. Philip.
Thank you. It may not be part of this policy, but do we have an ability, if a firm applies for a medical exemption for one driver, to see if they can employ that driver in another car, so we keep up the number of taxis that are available for disabled people?
I don't know if it assists or not, but we don't actually currently have anybody with a medical exemption under guide dogs. Whether that changes with this particular provision, because it now incorporates the 2, I'm not certain. But generally speaking, if a wheelchair accessible vehicle or assistance is required, we would make the assumption that an operator has asked that question and will only provide somebody who can do that, if at all possible. Does that clarify that a little bit for you?
Josie, I've got a question about the medical certificate. As with all medical certificates from a general practitioner, the patient has to pay for the examination and pay for the certificate. They do. Thank you for clarifying that. Do we have any further questions, committee? No? Well, thank you for that. And Linda, thank you for the amendments. So the recommendation is that the committee review and approve the proposed medical exemption policy so that it can be included in the Breckland taxi policy and procedures with immediate effect. All in favour? Thank you. Anyone against? Any abstentions? That's carried, Josie. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We'll go on to item 7, the next meeting, to note that the arrangements for the next meeting on Wednesday, the 11th of January, 2023, gosh, at 10 a.m. in the Anglia Room, the Conference Suite, Dereham. The meeting is now closed, and we will ask Julie to take us off live streaming. And we will move on to the meeting of the Committee of the Licensing Authority. Or do you want to go straight on, Julie? Thank you. Well, good morning, committee. We are running straight into the Committee of the Licensing Authority on Wednesday, the 19th of October, 2022. Go on to item 1, which is the minutes. Could I ask the committee to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of July, 2022? Agreed? Thank you. And apologies, Julie, do we have any apologies?
Madam Chairman, just the same apologies, one from councillor Ashby and one from councillor Dale.
Thank you, Julie. And do we have any urgent business? I don't. No. Tina? Josie? No? Declarations of interest? No declarations of interest. And no non-members wishing to address the meeting. So we'll move on to item 6, which is the quarterly team update, a verbal update by Josie Hoven, the Senior Licensing Officer. Okay, Josie?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll keep this relatively brief, but I thought it'd be nice to just bring some updates for you, really. So the Safety Advisory Group for the local authority, we had 2 large-scale events this year, Maui Wowie and the festival at Seno Park. A meeting was held with all partner agencies in the Safety Advisory Group in July here at Breckland. Site inspections were held with the attendance by partner agencies in the week leading up to each event, and visits to both events by local authority officers during the events as well. A wash-up meeting will be held in November with those 2 organisers to go over any issues that partner agencies and ourselves have with those events. SAG partners will be invited to attend, and we expect to hear at that meeting whether both festivals intend to go ahead next year. So watch this space. Hopefully we'll know in November. We did a quick survey of premises license applications from last year to this, just because I wanted to bring some facts and figures for you. I thought you might be interested to see where we're at with new applications. So in 2021, we had 16 new premises license applications. So that's under the Licensing Act 2003. This year so far, we've had 9. So we are starting to see a little bit of a downward turn. I don't anticipate that we're going to get 7 between now and the end of the year. I may be wrong, but I don't anticipate that we will. In 2021, we had 13 surrendered premises licenses. And in 2022, thus far this year, we've had 5. Now, some of them have come as no surprise to us because they have been businesses that have been closed for quite some time, and we've just managed to get the surrender. But 2 of those were unknown to us. We didn't know that they were going to surrender. So there's a strange twist because we had more surrenders last year, but also more applications. This year seems to be down on both. So it's, I think, just with the current climate, a watch this space. I'll try and give you an update again in January to let you know how things have progressed for the full year. Temporary event notices have just gone through the roof. So we've had 78 issued since the 1st of July this year. A total of 303 have been processed since the 1st of January. The same period last year, the 1st of January to the 18th of October, 149 were issued. So there's been a massive increase in the number of people requiring temporary event notices for different types of events, whether it be a wedding reception, a village hall event, etc., etc. So double, pretty much. Moving on to animal welfare. In July this year, Alan, who I think you've all met, our animal welfare officer, had a work experience person with him for most of the week. This person was of school age, hoping to go into the animal welfare field. And we received positive feedback from both parties. So we were quite happy to take part in that. And they really appreciated him taking them around and got a lot of use out of it, I believe. Al has also been working on the Banham Zoo inspection. That's been undertaken with pre-inspection work carried out by Al. The inspection itself was undertaken by authorised zoo inspectors with Al alongside them. There were a few issues to remedy, and Al is to follow up with another visit to check that these have been carried out. In the last quarter, Al has licensed 3 new licenses under animal welfare, with 4 more in the pipeline and in progress as we speak. And he's undertaken pre-application advice visits to new businesses for 3 new businesses. So that's aside from a normal application. These are people who've actually asked for some additional assistance. So we're now offering that as a service, a pre-application advice visit. So Alan will go out and give as much help as he can on what policies and procedures they need to have a look at how they're set up, give some advice. And that seems to be going down quite well. It seems to be very well received at the moment. So hopefully that will continue in good stead. Al also attended a 1-day licensing course at Colchester Zoo on reptiles and amphibians to complement his increasing knowledge of different species. Because obviously undertaking the zoo and some of our pet shops have more exotic species these days. So we're trying to get him as many different varieties of training as we can. Moving on to taxis, an officer has been conducting inspections on private hire operator records and policies once we receive their renewals in order to check compliance with the Department for Transport and our Breckland taxi policy changes that came into effect earlier this year. Pleased to report that all currently are on track with a few minor issues to be sorted. It's working twofold because we now have certainty that operators are meeting the requirements, and operators are better able to understand their responsibilities by having an officer go out and check those records and policies for them. We've licensed 13 drivers and 63 vehicles in the last 3 months. And surprisingly, of those, 18 were new vehicles. We weren't expecting those, and 5 were new drivers. So that was quite a surprise. We had a bit of a glut just before the school contracts came in September, of everybody wanting to put a new vehicle on, or a lot of people wanting to put a new vehicle on, which did cause a little bit of staffing issue, but we got there. So other licensing matters coming up. Scrap metal licensing renewals are coming in now. 90% of renewals are due in the next quarter. It's hereditary from the 3-year renewal cycle from the 2013 Act being introduced. We have 2 new scrap metal sites which have been visited by myself and the police to check compliance. And the new licensing officer will take over responsibility for renewals of sites and assist with collector renewals. Moving back to taxis just quickly, the DFT have not yet published their guidance to us on vehicle specifications. As you'll remember, they went out to consultation, which finished on the 20th of June. The website currently just says, we're analysing your feedback. Please keep checking this website. So I'm not going to lie, it's put back us reviewing our vehicle specification policy, which is annoying to say the least, because it's something we want to get on with. It's something the drivers want us to obviously look at, and because it hasn't been reviewed since 2007, we need to get on with it. I'm somewhat reticent to go too far with the review without having the DFT guidance, because we don't really want to go against statutory guidance. So I have a discussion coming up with Craig Fowler to discuss whether there are some things that we can do in the meantime, because we know things like window tints and things are an issue for the trade because of the way cars are manufactured these days. So we're going to be looking at that and possibly going out to a wider audience within the Norfolk Licensing Officers Forum. I'm going to bring it up at their forum and also at the Regional Institute of Licensing meeting, both of which are taking place in December. So I hope to come back with some form of update, if not proposal, in January to you, just to keep you abreast of what's happening there, because it's rather disappointing we've not had that back from the Department for Transport. We will be reviewing garage contracts for our testing stations for taxis and private hire vehicles in the coming months. We'll be asking, again, the Norfolk Licensing Officer Forum whether they've made any changes to theirs as well. So that's all ongoing. And then 2 other last pieces. The Business and Planning Act has been extended so that pavement licenses, I don't know if you remember, they were a short-term process that came in to allow tables and chairs on the pavements for businesses during COVID. That has actually been extended until the 30th of September 2023, and the same for off sales of alcohol for those premises with on sales. That automatic entitlement to off sales until 11 p.m. or earlier if their license is earlier, has now also been extended until the 30th of September 2023. That concludes my updates. Thank you.
Thank you, Josie. Members, do you have any questions for Josie on the updates? Tina, I'm sure you do.
No, I just want to say thank you, Josie. That's very, very comprehensive. And I'm glad to hear that we are going to be looking at the tinted windows and the increase of testing stations as well, because I know there's quite a big need for both. So I'm pleased about that. But no, thank you for that.
Josie, as far as the testing stations are concerned, what happens if vehicles from other districts use a testing station in Breckland? And we've found a fault with it.
Okay, so the testing stations are MOT registered garages, and we only authorise them to do
Right.
our mechanical tests for our licensed vehicles. So they can test away happily and
Yep.
contentedly MOTs for other things, and it will be the same as if you or I had an MOT done. If it fails, it fails. If it passes, it passes.
That's out of our hands.
It's out of our hands. We don't get involved in other local authorities' licensing procedures.
And the next question is, do we know, have we had any premises that are licensed premises that are closed? And if so, how many?
So the ones that we've had closed that we are aware of are the ones who have surrendered their licenses.
Okay,
And as I said, we've had 5 of those this year, 3 of which we were chasing because we knew the premises were closed, and 2 that were a surprise. I don't have the list of what they are to hand. I'm always conscious of GDPR when we're in these
Yeah.
meetings.
yes, of course. And it was interesting what you said about the doubling of the TENS applications. How is the illegal dog breeding going that Alan's been working so diligently on? Are we on top of it now?
I don't know if we'll ever be on top of it.
Yeah.
I think we're as near to on top as we can be. As I say, he has licensed 3 new dog breeders. I think 3 of the 4 new licenses he has currently in progress are also dog breeders, but we have seen a decline in dog breeders advertising, and I think it's because obviously the state of the economy at the moment. Generally speaking, sales of puppies have declined. We're starting to see an increase of younger dogs being taken to rehoming centres, unfortunately, because people are finding themselves in positions where they can no longer afford to keep their dogs. So we have seen a decline in advertising of puppies because I think, as we've stated here previously, it's no longer as lucrative as it used to be to actually breed puppies and sell them. So in a way, I'm kind of hoping that trend stays, because we don't want to see that spike that we had during COVID, which was terrible. So he's on top of it as much as he can be. He investigates every complaint that comes his way, and he's closing down any adverts on Pets for Home and forgive me, I've forgotten what the other 2 things are, but even the Kennel Club, he's gotten involved with them as well, and is having adverts taken down off the Kennel Club if they're not registered with the licensing authority and need to be.
That's very reassuring, Josie. I think
he's doing really great
Gumtree
work.
he looks on as
That's
well.
right. I couldn't remember that one. Thank you.
It's a very, very time consuming. Philip.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions around the taxi policy. Since we changed the fees and fares, have you had any feedback from operators?
So we've obviously implemented the fees. We're just doing a check at the moment because we've had the certificates to come in to say the meters are being calibrated. We just need to check that everybody who needed to do that has done it. The consensus has been they've been actually really pleased that the fares were increased. And to be perfectly honest, we haven't had any complaints about the fees. I think because we did the 2 together, if I'm honest. I think because we were able to put those fares up. It affects the private hire trade as well, because they look at those fares and increase theirs alongside it. So I think it's been as well received as any news of that sort can be. And yeah, I haven't got any negative things to feedback to you, because we haven't heard anything where we've had any complaints or anything. So there hasn't been anything from the public on the fares going up, which is reassuring. And I think everybody knows it's just a wait and see what happens in the current climate, isn't it, as to how the trade is affected going forward over the next 6 months.
Phil, can I ask you a question? Because Josie gave us feedback on the Mawal Festival. And I know that it was something that you were watching very carefully. Did you have any feedback on it?
No, apart from people said it went off with far less fuss than previous year. And I don't know if it was the wind was in the right direction, but very few people heard the noise, the music. But I think they changed the site, didn't they?
It did, yes.
Which seems to have worked. I think it went a lot better this year than last year.
Thank you, Philip. Yes, and I know that the involvement of the Breckland officers was certainly over and above what was required. And so I think probably after last year that the message to conform struck firmly home. So it's very good to hear from you that it passed by quietly. Susan, sorry, I didn't see you.
Can I just ask a question about reptiles and other animals? Because I don't know much about this, but do you require a license to keep, for instance, snakes and animals like that at home?
No, it's only if you're selling or if you're, say, a zoo or you have an exhibition of animals license that you would be required to have a license, unless it's on the endangered wild animals list. Now, reptiles don't tend to be. I'm sure there probably are some. Alan would be the best person to ask because he deals with it day in, day out. But there are dangerous wild animals where you do have to have a license.
So I have seen several adverts on Facebook about people who obviously keep snakes at home and have been breeding them and offering these, you know, whatever litters or whatever you call them of snakes to people. And I just thought, you know,
With the animal welfare legislation, there are a number of factors we have to take into account as to whether they require a license. So if you had your own snakes and you bred them and you sold them off and didn't, for our purposes, we're looking at, are you doing it on a regular basis? Have you made more than £1,000 of income? There's a number of factors that we have to go through that require you to have a license, which is what Al would do. He would look at the number of adverts somebody had got on one of those sites, see how many times they're advertising, at what price they're advertising it at, and see whether they're really more of a business than just selling off, say, the surplus stock that they had from their pets breeding, as it were. Does that, yeah, good.
Susan, thank you for that question. I always say to members that you are our eyes and ears. I mean, I quite often get a phone call from members with a concern about a licensed premises in their ward. And so with what you have just mentioned, if there's anything that does concern you and you contact the licensing team, they can then discreetly look into it. And because you are our eyes and ears about what's happening in the community.
yes, I think in these instances, it was someone who was just out, it just happened to be several of them, and it seemed as if it was a once off, that their snakes had just increased more than, but I just wondered, you know, what the legislation was, so thank you.
Philip.
Thank you. I share your frustration about the vehicle specification, particularly as people are buying new cars. If you say there are 5 people, I wonder if there's anything we could do just to either find out a little bit more about what the policy might be, so we can pass that on as a suggestion of how the specification could be, because it's gone on for a long time now, hasn't it?
It has gone on for a long time, but unfortunately the DFT won't tell us any more than what's on their website. Even if we were to contact them, it's going to be, we're still reviewing the responses. My guess is they had a lot of responses. That's why I'm taking it to the Norfolk Licensing Officers Forum and the Regional Institute of Licensing meeting, because I want to get a gauge on where everybody else is with their policies currently. As I say, I think there was, in the consultation document, there was a section about the tinted windows, and it appeared that the DFT at the time was saying they don't see that it's necessarily required any longer to restrict and not allow more heavily tinted windows in the rear vehicle. Obviously, we still have to meet the standards every car has to in the front vehicle and the front windscreen. So I think that's why I want to take it to those forums to get a gauge on what the other licensing authorities in and around us are looking at and whether they've actually made any changes to their policies currently, because it does seem to be the biggest bugbear amongst our drivers. Primarily because when you go to buy a car these days, generally the rear windows are tinted to some degree more than we would allow in our current policy. And I do think we need to, as I say, the policy was introduced in 2007. We all know how far manufacturing and technology has gone in that time. So I think we do need to think about it, which is why I would like to come back in January and just either give you an update or give you a proposal. Possibly it might even be only about tinted windows at that stage, but it's not off my radar by any stretch of the imagination. And if the DFT come out with it next week, we'll be on it. So that's all I can tell you at the moment. I'm as frustrated as everybody else is, I think, about it at the moment.
Thank you for the question, Philip. Tina, do you have any questions?
No.
Claire? Taylor? Keith? Mike? Linda? Susan? And I don't have any either, Josie, because I've asked mine. Thank you very much indeed. So we will move on to item 7, which is training requirements, if any. Committee, do you have any requests for any training requirements? Or if you don't at this very moment, could you let us know if something crops up that you would like us to look into? I'll leave that with you. And we'll move on to feedback and discussion on recent panel meetings that we've held. Josie, do we have any feedback?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think we've only had one panel hearing that I could find records of and remember, and that was the temporary event notice that was objected to by the police and subsequently allowed to take place because the committee went with the applicant and said that the 10 could take place. I don't want to give any further details than that because it was a closed hearing. And for GDPR reasons, I don't want to mention what the premises was, but that was the outcome. It's very unusual, I will say, for us to get a police objection to a temporary event notice. In all my time here, we have never actually had one that's fully made it to committee before. So that's the first one, and I've been here 16 years now. So it was quite a surprise. And I thought it was quite a good exercise, actually, from that perspective. But it was a good hearing, and I think it was a positive outcome. There certainly weren't any issues at the premises concerned following the event.
It was a good hearing. It was very, very thorough indeed. And all the attendees had a very, very good chance of putting their points of view forward and being heard. And so it went well. Tina, any questions?
No.
Nothing from anybody else? That's lovely. Thank you very much, Josie. The next meeting, to note the arrangements for the next meeting on Wednesday, the 11th of January, 2023, immediately following on from the licensing committee meeting, which starts at 10 a.m. in the Anglia Room, the conference centre at Durham. I'd like to thank the committee for attending and those watching via YouTube. And I can now declare that this meeting is closed at